Well, our political editor, Jane Patterson, is at the UN in New York with the Prime Minister. I asked her if there were any surprises in John Key's address.
Look, obviously Syria was always going to be mentioned by Mr. Key. I think North Korea was a bit of a surprise. He came out strongly about the nuclear test last September, calling it one of the greatest threats to international global security. Talking to reporters afterwards, he also acknowledged that campaigning for the Secretary General, which he did on behalf of Helen Clark, was quite unusual in a General Assembly speech, but he said that's all part of the campaigning. They've been working the room hard, to quote him, and that included personal introductions from Mr. Key, introducing Helen Clark to Barack Obama and the new British Prime Minister, Theresa May, today at the United Nations to really keep pushing her case.
Jane, the very big event is tomorrow, New Zealand chairing the UN Security Council, and this is pretty grown-up stuff because Syria is so tragic and so blighted by what Assad is doing, what the Russians are doing, what the US is doing, and the impossibility, it seems to me, of managing those conflicting interests in the short term. What is New Zealand going to do?
Well, of course, New Zealand is chairing the Security Council meeting tomorrow or overnight New Zealand time. It's really playing down expectations and doesn't expect anything as formal as a resolution. In fact, the feeling is that things are so fraught at the moment that they wouldn't take a resolution because it's nowhere near that stage. So this morning here in New York, the US Secretary of State John Kerry and his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov got together before a broader meeting of foreign ministers and apparently hammered it out, agreeing to at least present a united front to this meeting tomorrow, because if they can't get it together, then nobody can. So it's going to be slightly unusual tomorrow. Normally the chair, which would be John Key from New Zealand, would start and speak first. But to really give the Security Council a briefing as such, of course, in the past couple of days, 2 bombing incidents that are now under investigation, the US raid on the Syrian troops, and then, of course, the aid convoy really have made things incredibly difficult. So US and Russia, Kerry and Lavrov will brief the council tomorrow. Then the chair, John Key, will speak. At the very end, the permanent representative from Syria is expected to give their speech to the Security Council. Now, nobody really knows what they're going to say, if that becomes fractious or if there are any accusations against countries like Turkey or Saudi Arabia, then those countries may be given the right of reply. But at the moment, New Zealand quite determined to have a constructive meeting, but really who knows what's going to happen.
This is going to be fascinating, isn't it? Jane Patterson, our political editor, who will, of course, file on what occurs.